Two teenage girls walked through familiar streets on a quiet Sunday afternoon and vanished without leaving behind a single confirmed answer. They did not run away. They did not ask to disappear. They were not troublemakers. They were daughters, sisters, students, and friends who simply never made it home. Welcome to Hidden Truth, the channel where real cases are examined with care, depth, and honesty, and where forgotten stories are brought back into the light they deserve. Today we are uncovering the true and deeply unsettling disappearance of Dannette Latonia Millbrook and Jeannette Latrice Millbrook, fraternal twin sisters from Augusta, Georgia, who vanished on March 18, 1990 at just 15 years old. Before we continue, subscribe to Hidden Truth, because every subscription helps these stories reach more people and keeps pressure alive on cases that were pushed aside too soon. This story is not only about two missing girls, it is about warning signs that appeared hours before disappearance. It is about repeated requests for help that went unanswered. It is about official records filled with mistakes, a case closed far too early, and a family forced to live with silence instead of truth. Every step the twins took that day carries meaning. Every place they stopped raises questions. Every decision made afterward shaped the outcome. Stay with Hidden Truth until the end, because the deeper this story goes, the more troubling the unanswered questions become. On Sunday, March 18, 1990, Dannette and Jeannette Millbrook woke up in their home in Augusta, Georgia, expecting nothing more than a normal weekend day. The twins were 15 years old, fraternal sisters who shared a close bond but had their own personalities and dreams. They were students at Lucy Laney High School and were known in their neighborhood as polite, respectful, and responsible teenagers. Teachers described them as good students who followed rules and avoided trouble. They had no history of running away, no record of serious misbehavior, and no reason to suddenly disappear. That afternoon, Dannette and Jeannette decided to walk together to Church's Chicken on Laney Walker Boulevard. It was a familiar place in a familiar area, and the walk itself was one they had made many times before. The streets were busy enough to feel safe, and the daylight made the trip seem ordinary. After returning home from Church's Chicken, the twins told their mother, Mary Louise Sturgis, something that stood out. They said a man driving a van had followed them for part of their walk. They could not explain why he followed them or who he was. No description of the man was written down, and no official report was made about this encounter. This warning would later feel deeply important. Later that same day, the twins left home again to walk to their godfather's house. Their family had recently moved to a new apartment farther away from their school, and the twins needed money for city bus transportation for the upcoming week. Their godfather gave them $20 for bus fare and a small amount of extra money for snacks. After leaving his house, Dannette and Jeannette walked to their cousin's home. They asked their cousin to walk back with them because it was getting later in the day. Their cousin wanted to go, but her mother refused because night was approaching. The twins then walked to their older sister's home and stayed for approximately 15 minutes. Once again, they asked someone to walk with them. Their sister declined because she had recently given birth and could not leave the house. Only after the disappearance did the family realize how unusual it was that the twins repeatedly asked for company that day. As the afternoon moved toward evening, Dannette and Jeannette continued their walk and stopped at the Pump and Shop gas station located at the corner of 12th Street and Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. They bought chips, candy, and soda. The gas station clerk, a woman named Gloria, knew the twins and had seen them many times before. She later stated that nothing about their behavior seemed strange or alarming. They appeared calm, normal, and unafraid. Gloria became the last confirmed person to see Dannette and Jeannette Millbrook. At around 4:30 in the afternoon, the twins left the gas station and continued walking. They never reached home. They never contacted anyone. They never used the money they had been given. What began as an ordinary Sunday quietly turned into the beginning of a mystery that has lasted for decades. When Dannette and Jeannette Millbrook did not return home that evening, fear spread quickly through their family. At first, their mother, Mary Louise Sturgis, believed the twins might be delayed or staying briefly with someone they knew. As daylight faded into night, that hope slowly disappeared. The family began checking nearby streets, asking neighbors, and calling relatives to see if anyone had seen the girls. No one had. Late that night, the family contacted law enforcement to report the twins missing. They were told to wait 24 hours before filing a missing persons report. This instruction would later become one of the most painful and controversial moments in the case. Mary Louise Sturgis followed the instruction, believing that the system would work as promised. When the report was finally taken, critical time had already been lost. The first hours after a disappearance are often the most important, yet those hours passed without an organized search. Very little is known about the original investigation because the initial police file has reportedly been lost. This missing file has raised serious questions about how the case was handled from the beginning. What is known comes mostly from family accounts and later reviews. Almost immediately, errors appeared in official records. The twins' last name was recorded incorrectly as Millbrooks instead of Millbrook. Jeanette's middle name was listed incorrectly as Latressa instead of Latrice. These mistakes may seem small, but they had long-lasting consequences. Incorrect information was entered into databases, and those errors were never corrected. As a result, the twins were harder to track across missing person systems. The family continued calling law enforcement offices, asking for updates and guidance. They often received vague answers or no answers at all. In 1991, just 1 year after the disappearance, the case was officially closed. The family was stunned when they learned this. They were told different explanations at different times. One explanation claimed the girls were old enough to stay away from home legally. Another explanation claimed investigators had been told the girls were found. This second explanation was later proven to be false. Because of this claim, Dannette and Jeannette were removed from the National Registry of Missing Children. To the system, they were no longer missing. To their family, they were still gone. For years, the Millbrook family continued to call the sheriff's department, refusing to accept silence. At one point, they were told the twins had been removed from the home and placed into foster care, where they were later adopted. This explanation caused confusion and pain. Further investigation revealed that this information was false. A close relative had children in the foster care system, which likely caused the misunderstanding. Despite learning the truth, the family never received a clear explanation for why the case had been closed. As time passed, leads grew colder and memories faded. The neighborhood changed. Witnesses moved away. The man in the van mentioned earlier was never identified. The gas station visit remained the last confirmed sighting. The family began to realize that the mistakes made early in the investigation may have permanently damaged the chance of finding the twins. Still, they refused to give up. They kept records, saved articles, and continued asking questions. They believed that even if the system failed, persistence might bring answers. The disappearance of Dannette and Jeannette Millbrook was no longer just a missing persons case. It had become a symbol of how easily vulnerable voices can be lost when attention fades. As days turned into weeks after the disappearance of Dannette and Jeannette Millbrook, the silence from authorities became heavier for the family to carry. Mary Louise Sturgis continued to call law enforcement offices, hoping each call might bring news or guidance. Instead, she often received vague responses or was told there were no updates. The lack of urgency felt confusing and painful, especially because the twins had never shown signs of wanting to leave home. Friends, teachers, and neighbors all confirmed the same thing. Dannette and Jeannette were not runaways. They were responsible teenagers with routines, expectations, and a close family bond. Despite this, the investigation failed to gain momentum. Flyers were limited. Public alerts were minimal. Leads were not aggressively followed. The warning about the man in the van was never properly explored. The repeated requests the twins made for someone to walk with them that day were not treated as red flags. Instead of expanding the search, the case slowly began to fade from active attention. In 1991, only 1 year after the twins vanished, the case was officially closed. The family was not prepared for this decision and did not understand how it was justified. They were told at different times that the girls were old enough to stay away from home legally. This explanation ignored the fact that the twins were only 15 when they disappeared. Another explanation claimed investigators had been informed that the girls were found. This claim was later proven to be false. Because of this false information, Dannette and Jeannette were removed from the National Registry of Missing Children. Once removed, their case lost national visibility. Without visibility, tips slowed. Without tips, hope weakened. The family continued searching on their own, speaking to community members and revisiting the last places the twins were seen. Each return to those streets reopened emotional wounds. Years passed and the city of Augusta changed. Stores closed and reopened. Neighbors moved away. Witness memories faded. The gas station clerk remained the last confirmed person to see the twins, and that moment became frozen in time. As the family sought answers, they were told conflicting stories. At one point, they were informed that the twins had been removed from their home and placed into foster care, where they were later adopted. This explanation caused shock and confusion. Further investigation revealed this story was false. A relative had children in the foster care system, which likely caused the misunderstanding. No official apology was given for the error. No clear explanation followed. The emotional toll on the family was immense. Holidays passed with empty chairs. Birthdays came and went without celebration. The absence of Dannette and Jeannette became a constant presence. Their father, John Millbrook, struggled deeply with the loss. In later years, he lived in a nursing home while suffering from dementia. He passed away in 2021 without ever learning what happened to his daughters. Their sister, Shanta Sturgis, refused to accept silence as the final answer. As she grew older, her determination grew stronger. She questioned how two children could disappear and have their case closed with so many unanswered questions. She openly criticized the investigation and described it as careless and dismissive. Her persistence would eventually change the course of the case. For decades, the disappearance of Dannette and Jeannette Millbrook remained a painful reminder of what happens when early mistakes are never corrected. The case was no longer just about two missing girls. It had become an example of how systems can fail families when attention fades too quickly. Yet even in silence, the family continued to believe the truth still existed somewhere. For more than 20 years after the disappearance of Dannette and Jeannette Millbrook, the family lived with unanswered questions and little help from authorities. Despite being told the case was closed, the family never accepted that decision as final. Their sister Shanta Sturgis became the most persistent voice in the search for truth. She contacted the sheriff's department repeatedly, asking for updates, explanations, and accountability. Her calls were not casual or occasional. They were steady, determined, and driven by the belief that her sisters had been forgotten. In 2013, those efforts finally forced action. The Richmond County Sheriff's Office officially reopened the case. A sheriff publicly acknowledged that a terrible injustice may have been done for more than 20 years. For the family, this statement was both validating and painful. It confirmed what they had believed all along. It also confirmed how much time had been lost. When the case reopened, investigators began reviewing what little information remained from the original investigation. The missing police file became a major concern. Without it, early leads, witness statements, and investigative decisions could not be fully reviewed. This gap made it difficult to understand what had been done and what had been ignored. In 2017, investigators met with the Millbrook family and collected familial DNA samples. This step offered renewed hope that modern technology might succeed where earlier efforts failed. Around the same time, independent media began playing a critical role in the case. True crime podcasts and investigative journalists started examining the disappearance in detail. The Fall Line podcast dedicated an entire season to the Millbrook twins, bringing national attention to their story. Other podcasts discussed the case and introduced it to new audiences who had never heard their names before. These efforts helped raise a $10,000 reward for information leading to answers. The family believed increased visibility could generate new leads. Concerned that the reward was not receiving enough attention, podcast producers worked together to raise funds for a billboard. The goal was simple: put the faces and names of Dannette and Jeannette back in front of the public. Despite these efforts, official communication from law enforcement remained limited. Meetings were held, but updates were rare. Public statements were cautious and often brief. In 2019, Oxygen Media aired a 2-hour television special focused entirely on the disappearance. The program examined the failures of the investigation and the emotional toll on the family. Viewers across the country learned how easily a case involving two children could be mishandled. One of the most painful developments involved skeletal remains discovered in Aiken County, South Carolina in 1993. The remains belonged to an unidentified black female believed to be the victim of a homicide between 1990 and 1992. The Millbrook family believed facial reconstructions closely resembled Jeannette. When the remains were first discovered, authorities told the family they were not the twins, but did not provide an explanation. Years later, DNA testing confirmed the remains did not belong to either sister. Another shadow over the case involved Joseph Patrick Washington. He was active in the twins' neighborhood around the time of their disappearance. He was later convicted of multiple abductions and sexual assaults and sentenced to 17 consecutive life sentences. He was suspected in several murders but died in 1999 before standing trial in one case. No direct evidence ever connected him to the Millbrook twins. Still, his presence highlighted the dangers that existed in the area at the time. In 2023, a representative of the Richmond County Sheriff's Office declined to comment publicly, but stated the office would review any new evidence. For the family, this response felt familiar. The case was open, yet answers remained distant. Even so, the renewed attention ensured one important thing: Dannette and Jeannette Millbrook were no longer invisible. Even after the case was reopened, many questions surrounding the disappearance of Dannette and Jeannette Millbrook remained unanswered. The family hoped that renewed attention would finally uncover what went wrong on that Sunday in March. Investigators reviewed timelines, retraced routes, and examined the final confirmed sighting at the gas station. They considered the repeated requests the twins made for someone to walk with them that day. To the family, those requests felt like unspoken warnings. The twins were cautious teenagers who trusted their instincts. Their behavior suggested fear rather than freedom. Investigators also revisited the report of a man in a van who followed the girls earlier that day. No official record existed describing the man or the vehicle. This absence of documentation made it nearly impossible to track the lead years later. The case also raised concerns about how missing children cases were treated during that period. The instruction to wait 24 hours before filing a report delayed early action. The loss of the original police file removed critical context. Misspelled names and incorrect personal details created confusion across databases. Each error weakened the trail. Each delay reduced the chance of recovery. The family also questioned whether race and neighborhood played a role in how the case was handled. They believed that if two teenagers from a different background had vanished, the response might have been faster and stronger. These concerns were echoed by journalists and community members who later examined the case. As attention grew, more people began sharing theories and memories. Some recalled seeing two girls walking together that afternoon. Others remembered a van in the area, though no consistent description emerged. Online discussions brought renewed awareness, but also highlighted how little concrete evidence remained. The discovery of unidentified remains in Aiken County, South Carolina continued to weigh heavily on the family. Even after tests confirmed the remains did not belong to the twins, the possibility reinforced a painful reality. Someone out there still knew what happened. The name Joseph Patrick Washington also continued to surface in discussions. His criminal history showed that violent offenders operated in the area during that time. Although no direct link was ever established, the danger was real. The family lived with the knowledge that their daughters could have crossed paths with someone capable of terrible harm. As years passed, the twins became symbols of a larger issue. Their story represented missing children whose cases faded due to errors and neglect. Podcasts, articles, and documentaries ensured the story was not completely forgotten. Each retelling kept their names alive. Each mention reminded the public that the case was still unresolved. In 2023, when asked for comment, the sheriff's office stated it would consider any new evidence. For the family, this statement offered little comfort. They had heard similar words before. What they wanted were answers, not reminders of uncertainty. Still, they continued to speak out. They continued to share photographs. They continued to hope that someone might finally come forward. The disappearance of Dannette and Jeannette Millbrook remained open but unresolved. The shadows of that afternoon continued to stretch across decades. Until the truth is known, the story remains unfinished. For more than 3 decades, the disappearance of Dannette Latonia Millbrook and Jeannette Latrice Millbrook has remained unresolved, leaving a family suspended between hope and grief. Two 15-year-old girls walked familiar streets on March 18, 1990 and never returned, and the silence that followed was shaped by delays, errors, and missed chances. The warnings that appeared that day were never fully explored, including the man in the van, the repeated requests for company, and the final stop at the gas station. The investigation faltered early, records were mishandled, and a case involving children was closed while critical questions remained unanswered. Years later, the reopening of the case confirmed what the family had always believed, which was that a terrible injustice had occurred. Independent journalists, podcasters, and community voices helped bring the story back into public view, proving that attention can restore dignity even when answers are still missing. The search continues because someone, somewhere, still knows what happened, and truth has a way of surfacing when stories refuse to stay buried. These are the references. Wikipedia article titled, "Disappearance of Dannette and Jeannette Millbrook." The Charlie Project profiles for Dannette Latonia Millbrook and Jeannette Latrice Millbrook National Center for Missing and Exploited Children case listings. Huffington Post reporting on the reopening of the case. Daily Beast investigative coverage of the Millbrook twins. National Broadcasting Company news reporting on the family search. Oxygen Media television special on the disappearance. The Fall Line podcast season 1 coverage. WJBF local news reporting from Augusta, Georgia. If you believe forgotten victims deserve to be remembered and truth deserves persistence, subscribe to Hidden Truth right now and help keep real stories alive until answers are finally found.